Welcome back to Chasing Common Ground. I am joined for the first time by Zach Pello. Did I get your last name right?
Yeah, you got it.
Perfect. So being that this is your first time on the show, my audience, I should say, may not know who you are. So give me a little bit of backstory into kind of like how you got into the industry in the first place.
Yeah, thanks a lot again for having me on the show. Yeah, I started personal training right out of high school in around 2003. I just literally jumped right into it after sports. I was trying to find some sort of avenue, and lifting was that for me. And just that progression and feeling like I was still competitive with myself. And I was really lucky because one of my teachers was also a personal trainer and he had bought a gym. So he took me under his wing. He was a bodybuilder, gave me mentorship. And after going through college for about 5 years, took an extra year, I moved to the gym that I'm at now. And I've been there ever since, working with pretty much, just about everybody, men, women, old, young. But now I've kind of shifted over a little bit more towards women and group semi-private training for women.
Love it. So, as I was prepping for the show, I was kind of thinking about like catalyst moments, things that definitely created a shift in a career. So, if you were to reflect on the years past, what would you say was maybe your top one or two catalyst moments that you've experienced so far?
Yeah, I think working under my mentor, Brad Warner, he really laid the groundwork for a lot of the big points in training people. Like progressive overload, how to program, and all of those types of things. And that was like the foundation. When the problem is you kind of when you know a little bit, you think you know a lot. I kind of ran into that problem because I tried to fit everybody in the same box from what I learned in those first handful of years. So jump forward, let's say maybe 10 years later. The big catalyst for me, I can't really say like what shifted or when it shifted specifically, but I started to realize that nothing has to be done a specific way. And there's a lot of gray, a lot of context that you're missing when you read a book or do a certification. And learning to kind of meet where my clients were and realize it's not just about what you know and how to apply it, but it's also about knowing what not to worry about. And I think that was a big change for me. I did a certification with precision nutrition level 2, which was more based on coaching the individual and meeting them where they're at. And I would say that completely transformed. That was probably a catalyst in transforming how I approach coaching today.
I like that. And then when it comes to matching up your progressions in the business side, have you found there's been a moment when you've been able to kind of like optimize how you take care of yourself in alignment with how you take care of the business? Because what I find is a lot of people, they'll kind of hit their stride with their business or at least with their income or revenue. And then maybe they're sacrificing themselves in that process. And then maybe they find a way to kind of make time for themselves. Or maybe you've been consistent the whole time, but like kind of tell me more about what that's been like to kind of balance the life side of things with the business side of
Yeah.
things.
This is I'm gonna slightly go off here a little bit on a tangent because there was a time where when my business struggled the most, and there was a time where I got injured and I had these reoccurring issues. I used to be, like, I was pretty strong. I could do all this stuff, and I felt like that was my identity. And so I invested so heavily into that identity, and leaned on it so much that when I couldn't lift like I used to, right, I started diving into like video games and other avenues of competition and getting my mind away from that kind of that feeling of depression. It was blue. I was blue. I was down. I didn't want to really be at the gym to train people. And so I would just train people and then go home. You know what I mean? I wasn't like in it. And so then it took a long while. I got kind of tired of that and I started to get reinvigorated. And I think that's when I started doing like the PN level 2 and I started focusing on my business. And started thinking like, I need to apply the same principles I'm applying to my clients in regards to meeting them where they're at. And so I had to reset and reshape my expectations of my training and what my body could do, from stop trying to compare it from my early 20s, right? And focusing on what I can do now and with my body. And once I did that shift, it completely just transformed my fitness again, back to being just as fit as I was with my early 20s, but in a different way. And once I did that, it honestly, I just I started scheduling it in my planner, and it was no problem to get it done because I was reinvigorated. I saw progress week to week, and I knew how made me feel after working out, especially when I wasn't just training through pain and feeling like I kept having setbacks. So I think that principle stuck with me, the high that I got from that kind of progress, even though I couldn't make the progress like I was making the same way, finding a different way to make progress was such a high for me that I prioritized it even when I was like really ramping up my business.
I like that. And like I am a strong believer that like when we are able to make progress personally, it tends to benefit our businesses, even though it can be like a point of friction or high resistance. Like it can be like, I don't have time for this, or this is the last thing that I want to do. When we can find a way to realistically progress ourselves, even in like the continuing education aspect, it almost always, like, there has never been a time where it hasn't benefited business for me. And it's just like you have to take your ego and put it aside to be able to really like accept how true that sentiment is. And one of the things that I like to do when I get people who have been to the Real Coaches Summit is to do a plug for the Real Coaches Summit. And that's how you and I connected. I was just kind of like wandering through the Vegas casino and you actually came by and said hi. And I was kind of like trying to decide where I was going to do, or like where I was going to go, who I was going to hang out with. And I remember you just like so friendly and personable, which really like
Appreciate
resonated
that.
with me. So, what was your biggest motivator for going to the Real Coaches Summit this past year?
Man, at all these years of coaching, I've never been to an in-person event, first of all. And, the first 10 years of my coaching, it just, I don't know. I don't know what held me back. Again, I was kind of in that dark place with, just not feeling like myself. But then, once I kind of got my business up and running where I wanted it, and then I have kids. So it was like, and then I ended up having 4 kids, and that was just not on the list at the time. Um, but I ran into Andrew Coates online, started following him, and just seeing his progression. I think he was probably the biggest motivator because I saw how, he talked about the only way he's been able to grow like he has is from the in-person events, meeting people, talking to people, building those relationships. And, now he's able to even speak at these events. He's like, you're not going to email an event coordinator or someone who's putting on an event and say, hey, I want to speak at your event if you've never been to their event. I was like, that is a great point.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I was like, it's not that I want to do that, but I was thinking, I need to invest and embed myself into the culture, into the people that I see day in, day out on social media. And, being able to
Mhm.
meet people, like Mike from Stronger You and, all these people that I've been talking to for years, Kate, Coach Solo from Precision Nutrition, right? I mean, it's crazy because she was one of my coaches at one point. So that was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and invest in this and it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I love that. How did you make the decision of like, because you have a family that's a lot of commitments, obligations. How are you able to make that call that you are going to step away from that to be able to attend the Real Coaches Summit?
Well, my wife is obviously, she's wonderful. So I'm going to make a plug to her. Stephanie, she runs the ship, she's a great partner in all this. And she encourages me if I think it's going to be good, for me, for us as a family. She's like, go do it. 100%. Every time I've got a mentor or coaching, she's always been on board. And really, it's not even a matter of, asking for permission, right? It's more like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this and we'll talk through it. But I actually had her come out with me. I mean, this is like, we don't get to do a lot of trips together. So she came out a couple of days before. We went to Zion and did some stuff together. And then she flew home on that Sunday before.
Mhm.
So I think that was a great opportunity for us to connect as well. So if I can every other year or so kind of make that kind of trip, I think we're gonna probably
Mhm.
keep that going.
I love that because people will hear me promote events and stuff and they're like, "Man, you could just go whenever." And it's true. I don't even have a dog right now. So it's like I could
No.
just kind of dip out and as long as my clients are taken care of, it's not a big deal. And I also like that Andrew Coates had an impact on you because he's a big reason why I've gone to all the conferences that I've gone to because everything from I went to a Kansas City Fitness Summit in 2019. I've been to two of the Real Coaches Summits. We've hosted some conferences here in Edmonton. There was another iteration of a conference in Edmonton before the ones that I helped facilitate as far as production goes and stuff. And every
Nice.
time, I make, even if it's just one meaningful connection, it makes a big difference. Like whether it be somebody that I put on my podcast, somebody that I help with something, or somebody that becomes like a really good friend, there's always value to be drawn from it. So I'm always a
Oh yeah.
big advocate for if I personally enjoy the conference, I'm just going to promote the crap out of it. But that aside, let's move on to the next topic here. So, what I'm curious about is when has been a time that you changed your mind about something that you used to have a strong conviction about?
Early on in my career, it's funny because I see stuff that I used to believe when I first started coaching, because it's been a while. It's been 22 years or so. When it's come around again now, right? So things that I believed in then has come around and to the point where it's almost like, but Zach, like, but don't you know about this? I'm like, yes, I know about it. I changed my mind. And I give you a couple examples. And, we might disagree on some of this stuff, but, I used to be really big on, well, you're not eating enough to lose weight when I first started coaching the first 3, 4 years, because I saw it anecdotally without getting a large enough sample size. And it made sense to me in some ways. And also, we used to talk about like, oh, you got to eat 6 meals a day to keep the metabolism burning. And on paper, only being in the industry for a few years, man, that made a lot of sense to me, right? Kind of seems to. Well, again, as I started coaching people and then the research started coming through on top of it, I really did a 180 on it. And maybe to some degree to too far. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But those are a couple of big ones that I started out with. That I'm kind of at the opposite mindset now after 20 some years, and I so I think that's a huge one. The other thing would be early on, I felt like everybody had to, and I mentioned this earlier about people having to do this or having to do that, but like everybody has to barbell squat, barbell deadlift, and bench press, like there's no point in lifting if you're not doing that. I completely disagree with that now, 100%. Again, what are people trying to do when they come into the gym? 95% of the time, it's not about hitting PRs on their bench or their deadlift. It's about just feeling better, enjoying the gym enough to where they want to come every week, for years to come. And so that was a big shift, taking some of what I believed I wanted out of the equation and figuring out what my clients wanted. So that was a big shift. I'd say those three things were some of the things that I shifted in my mindset over the years, at least three of them. There's a lot more too.
Yeah, but I like that because it's kind of coming from a place of self awareness and also from a client centered approach. Because we can work with a variety of people where you might have to pull something from like 10 years ago that worked with another client. And it's like, okay, we're going to try this protocol. And then the next day you might work with somebody else where it's like, okay, this is a completely different scenario, and you're going to have to kind of like relate it to an archetype that you may have encountered more recently. Then there's also so many other factors. Like one of the things that comes up for me is like social factors, environmental factors, and we can specify this as it relates to like where they train, who they're surrounded by kind of thing. So if you were to kind of like think about people that you've worked with, what have been the like kind of the staples for the people who've been successful as far as like the environment in which they train and like the social circle that they have?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there, environment is huge, especially for the gym setting. I think most people, not everybody, thrive in a gym setting where there is community because it holds them accountable. And that's why I'm a big believer in the semi-private training where, I'm only doing 3 women at a time, 2 or 3 women each session, but that's enough to like make people feel like they want to show up and, they get to know people by name. And like our gym is pretty big, but it's small enough and people are regular enough to where, if you've been coming for a few months, people say hello. How are you doing? People get to know you a little
Mhm.
bit. I think that really does help. In terms of at home support, I do think that I think the biggest thing is having a supportive spouse. Um, like I mentioned earlier about my wife, totally being on board with whatever I need to do. I mean, obviously there's a limit to that, but I've never really hit it. But having that supportive spouse who understands what your goals are and you've had that discussion with them and they're going to support it as best they can. If it's something that means a lot to you, your goals are just as important as their goals and vice versa. Right. And if you don't have that, I think
Yeah.
it's so much harder, right? If you don't have that kind of support, it's just so hard to make changes in your life, especially if you have a family or you live with someone else.
And all of that said, if you've ever encountered someone who maybe like, let's say their environment going to the gym was difficult, or maybe just like their social support was kind of like opposed to the idea of going to the gym. Maybe they thought like it's a waste of money, it's not a good use of time, you have so many other obligations. How have you supported like the people that you're working with to incorporate kind of a shift in that mindset? Or what have been some things that have worked to kind of like spur some positive change?
I think the biggest thing is try to figure out, well, okay, if you're uncomfortable with doing that, what are you willing to do? And, are you willing, is say your spouse is unwilling to, you know, doesn't agree with something or whatever, but I'm like, are you able to work out at home? If so, I'll support you in that. I'll be your partner in that, and I'm gonna write up your workout plans for you at home. I'll tell you just the basic equipment you need, so it's minimal investment. And, I think sometimes you have to show up and show that you're dedicated for the other person, because sometimes they're like, "Oh, okay, I see this is a big deal to you. This is a lot bigger of a deal than I thought it was." So in the meantime, let's focus on some things that are less intrusive to your financial situation, less intrusive to your situation with your spouse. Because I have had those situations where, they're like, "Oh, there's no way that, he would be cool with me getting a gym membership." I'm like, "Okay, well, let's make some workouts for home. Let's work around it then." I mean, I'm not gonna you don't wanna try to cause a wedge there, whether you agree with it or not, right? As a coach, that's not our business, I feel like, at least not I don't feel like it is for me. It's to listen and try to work with their
And
situation, and I think if you can work with their situation, right, they're more likely to able to actually do it.
well, I like what you said there because like sometimes people need to see proof of concept. Like they almost need to see things working. And then they're like, oh, so like you're hitting like a roadblock doing this stuff at home, and you might be able to get better support and progress further if you went to the gym. And then there's like a case for doing that. Whereas like They might be
They
under
might
the
be under the
impression that it's
impression.
sort of like a fleeting inspirational moment where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna get back in shape. Things are gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. I'm gonna be so strong. And they might to see they need to see that little window of commitment. And I
Right.
like that. Now, the other question that I have for you is what has been a
A
goal that
goal.
somebody's had when they're working with you that kind of made you stop and think like this is what it's all about?
Trying to think about that because you get a lot of good goals that I've heard over the years, and I've heard things from being able to go on hikes with my kids because they're aging parent, an older parent. Say they're 50 years old and they have a 5-year-old or something, and they're thinking, man, I'm going to be 60 when they're 15. And, they want to be able to be
Mhm.
active and doing the hikes and going out and doing things with them. To me, that's what it's really about, right? And I think on the surface, say someone younger, it's usually because they want to look better and all those things. But you ask them 10 years down the road, that's going to shift, right? And but the good news is they started working out regardless of the goal, the reason why initially. But the hope is you get them going for whatever reason. But it transfers into this really cool thing of, wanting to be functional for your family, your grandkids, your spouse, so you can do things longer and continue to do. I have an 80-year-old client, she still does her gardening. And her goal is to be able to do that until she's ready to go. We talked about it today. And so she's still lifting weights twice a week and she's still doing her gardening in her 80s. I think that's really cool.
I love it. I mean, like that's the way it should be. The thing that people sometimes lose touch with is that like sometimes you do have to add in things into your lifestyle in order to make stuff like that possible. Like people will see somebody who is aging beyond 70 and they'll think, "Oh, it must just be the genetics." But then they don't
Oh,
realize
yeah.
how many other things that they have in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it be like for some people, the key to their longevity is sort of like regimented chores and tasks plus baseline of movement. Like maybe
Yeah.
they have consistently walked over 7,000 steps for decades. And what they lose sight of is how easy it is for us to kind of slip and fall into that like 1,500 to 3,000 step per day category where we assume if somebody's asking, we're like, oh, yeah, I get 10,000 steps, no problem. But then when they start to track it, they're like, oh, yeah, no, I got like 800 today. It just
Yep.
felt like I walked further. What has been some of the ways that people that you work with have maintained kind of like their non-exercise activity thermogenesis? What are the things that have come up for people in your kind of circle?
It is kind of tough because, we want to encourage increasing meat as much as possible. And many times they have some sort of step tracker with their smartwatch or whatever. And, of course they're gonna go do walks and stuff. But the problem is that what's more sustainable, like how about we somehow incorporate activities that naturally get your steps up, right? And so you don't have to just go on walks. There's nothing wrong with going on walks. Don't get me wrong, but like, can we start to incorporate activities that are fun? You can do stuff with your family and increase your step count. So that's one thing that I at least talk to my clients about because, like, okay, sure, yeah, we're going to get you to 10,000 steps a day. So if you're at 7,000 and you've got a few hours left, go for a walk. Of course, that's great. But unless are, are you going to be tracking your steps every day for the rest of your life? Probably not, right? So we need to build in some systems and some things that naturally get you there. Because I do think that while going on walks is very sustainable, but like trying to like micromanage your steps every day and, do stairs at night before you go to bed, just take your steps. I don't think that's going to be what you do forever. Right. But gardening
Yeah.
and playing a sport, all those things, I think we need to try to get back to and move our bodies. And that should get the steps up naturally.
Totally. And I find that like having an approach where you help it become part of their identity can help a lot. So like in the population that I work with online, some of them enjoy walking around certain locations. So like maybe it's a university campus, or
Yeah.
maybe it is like I have some people that I work with that take care of other family members, or they take care of like kids and stuff like that. And so they incorporate it into like the social aspect of things. But it's
Cool.
ritualistic because every like Sunday or something, or every like Thursday, they're going to do this thing and it involves other people. And so they're going to
Great.
do it and it's going to be a consistent volume of it. Or even just things like I have some people who play pickleball. And so that's a great way to increase activity. Plus, it
Money.
fills that social bucket for people. But what I find is that we almost need to support them in finding these things that they can fit into the puzzle of life. So like they
Sure.
have to be enrolled in these different weekly reoccurring commitments. So for me,
Yeah.
like I visit my parents on most Sundays, and almost every single time that I visit them, we go on a walk. And because
Yeah.
of that, we both go on at least one walk a week. But because we stay in contact throughout the week, we're each independently probably going on more than one walk, but that's a pretty solid baseline. And then if
Yeah.
it's like somebody that I am working with that I am not able to kind of like literally support them with it, then maybe I'll help them reflect on somebody that they might want to catch up with. And then they kind of like rack their brain like, oh, well, like I really get along with this person, but I haven't seen him in 4 years. So I think making it identity based can help, and then definitely, like, amplifying the social benefits of it too can make it really fun. So I agree with you there, and it's just, like it's neat to see what we can do when we think about it less from, like, a data angle and more from a, like, filling a person's social bucket angle. Now I am curious, what has been an unorthodox way that somebody that you supported has found a way to strength train?
That is kind of a tough one off the top of my head here. I mean, obviously just doing body weight stuff at home, I think is a easy way to work out when they don't have equipment or they don't can go to the gym. I mean, obviously, yeah, I mean, it really hasn't gone too far beyond that. I'll be honest with you. Um, Definitely
Mhm.
body weight stuff. And, and also just like I have a client, she's like level one client, right? Very beginner, very low motivation, discipline to want to do this stuff. She's burned out. She works a lot. So for her, it's like even 20 like off the counter push-ups. That's a workout for her. So instead of
Yeah.
like a more like creative ways just to slip in exercise. And so another day might be 20 squats. And I tell her to count that as a win. That's a check mark. You did it and we can build from that, right? So I think in that way, that's kind of my direction of kind of a creative way to get it in because some people, it is just so taxing for them to think of doing a whole workout. And it's easy for some people to kind of talk that down, like, oh, come on, And I get that, but man, so everybody's got different things going on in their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that I've come across lots of people where it's like you just have to have like a positive feedback loop. And if they're really struggling, then it's like, okay, today we are going to do 15 bicep curls. And then you're going to let me know when you're done. And then let me know how you're feeling. Because if you feel like you can do a bit more, then I'll kind of give you something else that you can stack onto
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
The things that I have kind of learned or experienced is that sometimes sort of like assessing a person's like day-to-day activities and then giving them a way to do what they do, but just a little bit better can be a great opportunity. So like I have a lot of people that I work with who enjoy gardening, and then just like teaching them sort of like form when it comes to gardening can be pretty powerful. So like teaching them how to like hinge when they're going down to pick weeds, or even them giving them some insight on like the form for like a duck walk or a bear crawl and stuff and then sort of like taking an assessment as to what they have the most buy-in on. Because like sometimes you tell people a thing that they can do and they have no buy-in and they're not going to do it. And it's just kind of something that we have to accept. But it's just like, I love the evolution of our craft and where we can kind of really see them for who they are and what they enjoy and look at ways to kind of consult with them and work alongside them to make their experience better. Even if it doesn't have to, like, it might not be in the gym. They may never set foot in the gym. But as they start to get progressions and they're like, oh man, this is good. Like, I like this. Then they might be more inclined to go to the gym than they would have otherwise been. Now, I am someone who's very goal oriented. I always have sort of like a North Star that I'm aiming towards, both from like a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint. And I love learning about other people's sort of like North Star, the thing that kind of gets them out of bed in the morning. And we all have different answers to this. But if you had something that you're aiming towards that might be 10 years away from now, can you kind of paint a picture of what that looks like?
Yeah, the picture 10 years from now. You know, health is a big one for me. And overall, my hope is that I'm healthier in 10 years than I am now. That's my goal. I want to be stronger. I want to be healthier. I want to be more flexible in 10 years. And I want my joints to feel better in 10 years. I know that sounds crazy. I get a lot of people, they're always like, oh, you just wait. It's just going to keep getting worse. And I'm 41 now. And when I would say 10 years ago, I was in worse pain than I am now. So I feel like that's my next goal, is to be in less pain and have better blood work, better blood pressure in the next 10 years. And like, I'm not trying to put on pounds of muscle, like slabs of muscle, but I just want to have a little bit more muscle. That would be a good goal, and feel a little bit stronger. I have very good expectations on that because I'll be, going into 50 at that point. But that's where all of my progress is driven into. It's like progression on my lifting, progression on my mobility, my rehab, my cardio, all those things, because I know that's what's going to take me where I want to be by the time I'm 50. And you know what? If I don't hit those goals, but I know I did all those things, at that point in my mind, I'm just chalking it up to that's how my body's going to do. It's okay that it's not perfect. If I don't feel better in 10 years when I'm 50, that might just be my genetics, and I'm okay with that. I'm not going to be upset that I did the things I did, to improve.
Mhm. I like it. And like, I think, like for myself, I'm 33, so you got some years on me, but I can share my experiences in my 30s. And it like, I am someone who's a strong believer that like your mindset can kind of like facilitate your outcomes. So like, if you go into a new decade and you're thinking like, oh, I'm getting old, I need to like take it easy, I'm getting sore, this is
Yep.
just how it is, then you're probably going to just slow down and become deconditioned and regress. But
Yep.
if you're like, nope, I'm still young, I still got it, if you have that kind of a mindset, then you're more likely to do the things that it takes, even if you have to put your ego aside, in order to maintain like a good quality of
Yeah.
life. Like my dad has done online training with me for a while, and he actually reached out through my website because he was having a hard time walking across the yard. And first and foremost, I was amused that he actually used the website and didn't just
That's
like
crazy.
give me a call.
Awesome.
But it was a beautiful way of showing support. But nonetheless, like then he started integrating more hamstring training, more like direct quad training. And like there was a lot of things that had regressed with age. And then when he started integrating them back in, like I mean, he outruns my oldest brother. Like
That's amazing.
there's no
Love
dancing
that.
around that. And
Yep.
it's like all the respect to my brothers, but it's just like if dad can outrun them, then it's not only a testament to my dad's health, but it's also maybe
Yeah.
like an indicator of what need to be done for my brothers.
Agree.
But all that to say, sometimes like when we put our ego aside and kind of just assess where we're at with things, I find like for myself, I benefit most from mobility at this point. I like that you brought up blood pressure. That's been a big focal point for me. With that said, what have been your protocols for yourself personally for trying to manage blood pressure and stuff like that? What have you had to implement to make improvements in the right direction?
Yeah, that's because I do get a pretty bad white coat syndrome at the doctor's office, man. It's been like that forever, but it'll be like 150 over 90 at the doctor's office, which is crazy. And then finally, a couple of years ago, because, you know, I looked healthy and fit, and the doctors was like, "Ah, it's so big, you're fine. You just got white coat syndrome." But finally, I had a doctor say, "Look, you get a blood pressure cuff and take it at home." So I took it at home, and it was better, much better, like 130 over 80 probably. But I still think I was probably getting some sort of white coat syndrome. But even if it is not white coat syndrome, I didn't care because I was like, I still want to get this figured out. So I started putting a higher emphasis on sleep. Over the last 2 years, I went from zero cardio. I started out with 10 minutes, 5 days a week. And now I do 30 minutes, 5 days a week of cardio. I also, every morning, I do breath work for about 5 minutes. I'd say right now, that's probably the biggest changes I've made. And then just trying to keep a little bit leaner physique too. I think it's a big part of it as well. So yeah, the cardio,
Mhm.
going 150 minutes of cardio a week, um, the breath work every day, 5 minutes in the morning, and then doing, getting more sleep and keeping a leaner physique. Those are the biggest things I focused on.
And then with breath work, is it like box breathing? Is it kind of just like how do you do breath work for yourself?
I do a body scan. So I start at the head, go all the way down to my feet. I focus on one section at a time with a breath. I do about 4 or 5 seconds. Inhale, I hold for 2 to 3 seconds, and then I exhale for about 6 to 8 seconds for each spot on my body. And then I go down and then come back up.
Mhm. I like it. And it's just like it's so interesting because sometimes I'll reflect back to episodes that I recorded back in like 2018 and just like the things that I was talking about. And then I realized like how my topics have shifted as I've gotten older. But then a lot of like anybody that's been in my world has gotten older in equal capacities. Like nobody's just paused their age. We got
Yep.
no Benjamin Buttons over here. But it's just that like it's so cool to see the evolution of us because then in the same sense, like if we've worked with a client, like I've got some clients that have been with me for like 6 plus years and they're aging too. And like the
Yeah,
whole regime shifts and
totally.
changes. And then we can also pull from the toolbox with people who we meet that are in a different like age or different demographic. And we can be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, this worked for me when I was that age.
Right.
Or this worked with
Yep.
this specific client when they were that age. Now, one of the last questions that I'll ask you is what is something that's just really piqued your interest, that's kind of absorbed you with regards to either business or life, something that's like a rabbit hole that you've been diving down and learning about?
I think the biggest thing for a little while, I was trying to grow my business and finding ways to scale my business. And that I spent the last 10 years really trying to go online and grow that side of things with the in-person business as well. But I finally kind of fell into more of a balanced approach to where I'm doing, both, but I'm not worried about trying to really scale at this point. And so now it's like just diving in again. We've talked about this already, but mostly into my own health, my holistic health, all around, including reigniting friendships that I've neglected and trying to find ways because I have been so over these years, these as a coach, I've been so focused, hyper focused on this that I have no knowledge of anything else. That's what I feel like. So if I'm hanging out with friends, man, I'm like, hey, what are we gonna talk about? So this is something that I've been trying extra hard to do is to, reconnect with friends and really try to engage because I've been so removed from that with kids and everything. And I think it's kind of a weird way to answer your question, but trying to find ways to, again, self-care, this is still in that realm, but it's to get back that connection and think of ways like to diversify my knowledge and spend
Yeah.
time, learning about other things, reading about other things, because I think new experience is very valuable in staying young. And, I picked up mountain biking recently, probably last summer. So I'm just trying to find new things to do. And one of my friends, he mountain bikes to me. So that's been the biggest thing I feel like that I've been really focused on recently. Um, a different idea. Yeah.
I like it. Like for me, I started playing Lego again, building Lego.
Nice.
I would do this thing where like maybe on a quarterly basis, I'd buy a new Lego set. I actually still have one that I bought back in, or actually I received it back in February. My brother
Awesome.
bought it for me for my birthday. And I find like I can definitely relate to Mike Dola's passion for Lego. I find it to be grounding, almost meditative. And it's sort of a
Yeah.
way to kind of take me away from like that obsessive aspect of like focusing on work or fitness or nutrition.
Yeah.
And it allows me to just be. And then in the
Yep.
same sense, I find myself very drawn towards like entrepreneurship or just like what's happening in like the business space around me or real estate space. I'm just like, I want to know like what's coming,
Yeah.
what new innovations people are coming up with, what entrepreneurial ideas they're thinking of, or what solutions, problems that they're solving. And I think
Totally.
it helps us as individuals not only to stay fresh and stay sharp, but also to be truly relatable to the people that we help, the people that we serve.
Yep.
Because then when we're on the gym floor with them and they're having their like 60-second or 90-second rest, we can talk about like what investments they're working on, or maybe what their favorite video game is, or like what they thought about something that happened in the local area last week. And I find it definitely helps with my retention. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm just gonna train you with you for like a year and then I'll be out," and like they'll stay for like 3+ years
Yep.
because we've built that strong social connection along with it. But that said, I'd love to know what are a couple books, as many as you like to share, that you've really enjoyed over the past couple of years.
Well, I used to definitely, if I were to read a book, it would be self-help. I mean, Atomic Habits was a big one. Motivational interviewing. Can't remember who wrote that one. Was another big one. Those are probably the two biggest ones that stand out to me the most. Um, but one thing I encourage, and my wife encouraged me to do this, we stopped from watching TV at night and now we just read. But she said, if you're going to read before bed, during the time we would watch a TV show, she's like, you really need to read fiction.
Yeah.
So that has been a game changer for me. I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, I'm reading all the books she's reading. Oh, so I think sometimes it's too easy to get tangled into the self-help books and all this stuff. I think it's good to break away from that occasionally. And that has been this past year for me. Pretty much, every night spending about 45 minutes reading fiction.
I like it. I think that's important. It's something that personally I struggle to make myself do. Like when I was a
Yep.
kid, I would read a ton. I would probably go through like several books a month, all fiction. Big Harry Potter guy, read the Lord of the Rings
Nice.
books, read all kinds of different series and stuff. There was like
Yeah.
a series on fictional sports teams, series on different like cool adventures that people would go on, deep sea diving, climbing Mount Everest, etc. And any opportunity that like a teacher would give me to read more, I'd love it. And then when I went into being an adult, then it was just like all self-help, all productivity, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely feel like a pull to kind of get back into the fiction books. And there's a lot of friends that I've had on the show that would say the same thing. So if there's any people who are like super personal development, super fitness and stuff, I think both them and myself should dive into some fiction books. And honestly, I might just kind of start reading the Harry Potter books again and just kind of like see
Yeah.
what I forgot,
Yep.
see how life has changed and how I perceive the book differently. So now I've got one last question for you. And this was a question that I asked when I first started my podcast, and I've recently been bringing this question back. If you were to give it a piece of advice to someone on how to live their life in the most authentic way to the fullest, what would that piece of advice be?
I think to sit back and really write down what are the most valuable things for yourself and look forward and ask you, where is your goal to be with those things in the next 5 to 10 years? I did this and I thought about like what I was trying to do in my business. And when I wrote this out, it all came down to the same thing. It was to be able to spend more time with my family and my kids. And so it was a big realization because here's the problem. I'm trying to build my business and spend all these years trying to grow that when I need to spend time with my kids now. And I didn't realize that until I did that. And that was a big mindset shift for me that right now is the time to spend with my kids. I don't need to be trying to scale. I need to make enough money to support my family and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think this was such an important thing for me to go through and write out what mattered most. Like, the 5 whys. I'm sure you've heard of the 5 whys, right?
Yeah.
Like asking yourself, right? So I asked myself, why do I want to be a coach? Or why do I, and it just, in the end, it was, at first it was to help people, in the gym or whatever. And it slowly transitioned into the real truth as I kept asking, well, why do I want to help people? And why do I want to do that? Why do I want to do that? And so I think that is one of the most valuable things that I've done that kind of shifted my mindset for my life to be able to live my life to the fullest.
I like that. I think that's honestly one of the best answers I've gotten to that question. And it can help people in ways that they may not have realized. Because what I witness in a lot of people, especially like career oriented people or people who feel the pressures of kind of making sure that their family is set up, is their first thought is that in doing what they're doing, they're making their family's lives better. But what we forget is like, this is sort of a general statement, but like money isn't real. Like it's real to the extent that it allows us to get our essential goods. But like the pace and cadence to which we can generate money is not the same as like how we age. And it's not the same as like how time passes and how every moment with our loved ones is finite. And so like for me and my own life experiences, I try to make time with family and close friends like a non-negotiable. I could have like a ton of different things on the go that I have to finish up, but I will put that on pause to make sure that I consistently spend time with family or like support people or make things happen, even if it means I'm putting like a personal, like business goal on the back burner. Because when it comes time to go back to that, like that is never going to go anywhere. When it comes time to go back to that, I might be able to make progress faster, but I can't slow down time with my parents. I can't slow down time with my nieces. I can't slow down time with my brothers. And for anybody who's experienced loss at any point in their life, they realize that like we aren't promised anything. Like we aren't guaranteed that there'll be a next time. And so I just love your answer. And I hope
Nice.
that a lot of people kind of like take it to heart and kind of implement it into their own life because it can be very transformative if people execute on that.
Yeah.
But with that said, how can people find you? Like I'll definitely have your Instagram in the show notes, but where are the other places that you want to send people?
You can find me at Zach Pello on Facebook, pellofitness.com as well. And I've got a YouTube channel. I've been posting about one video a week on there under Pello Fitness as well.
Love it. With that said, I'd like to thank you so much, Zach, for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.